Welcome to episode 110 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Sean Baker and Chris Bergoch, who wrote the film Tangerine, which appeared at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on the blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 110. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide: how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. So the big thing I'm working on right now, obviously, is still my Kickstarter campaign. As you listen to this episode, assuming you're listening to it the first week that it's released, which it's the week of February 8th, 2016, I'm in the final week of the campaign. At this point, it's pretty clear it's going to be nip and tuck whether I'm able to hit my goal or not. Money is still coming in, but it's definitely slowing down. So please, if you think you might be able to contribute to the campaign, please don't delay any longer. As I said, we're now in the final stages of this Kickstarter campaign. I will link to the campaign in the show notes. Any support is much appreciated. Also, I've added a bunch of new rewards as well as I've also added a bunch of new rewards as well. So if you checked out the campaign page early on in the process, that first week or so, go back, give it another look. I've added a ton of new rewards. Many are geared specifically to screenwriters. I'm essentially selling off a lot of the SYS screenwriting services at a deeply discounted prices, so you can pick up a lot of the services we offer for much less money. Obviously, you get to use those services normally, and then we, Selling Your Screenplay, will obviously get a contribution to help make the film happen. So it really is a win-win. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Kickstarter right now. I've been doing mini podcast episodes with Kickstarter updates on Wednesday or Thursday of every week. So keep an eye out for that. Probably another one of those will be released this week. Probably on Wednesday or Thursday. I try and always get it out on Wednesday, but usually it ends up getting out on Thursday. I did get an update on the spoof comedy that I finished up early in January. I've been talking about this script really probably since October. It's a spoof comedy. I was hired to write the script. Wrote a first draft, did some rewrites, got that to the producers in early January. The producers, I was emailing with the producers really just on, I don't even remember quite how it came up. But anyways, I was emailing with the producers, and then they emailed me at one point and said, hey, would you be open to a spitballing session sometime this week just to go over a few things? And it sounds like they've made some offers to directors, and some of these directors, one in particular, has some ideas for the script. That's pretty normal. You know, once you get a director involved, he might hopefully I'll have some good jokes to add. So there'll be a little bit of rewriting there. It sounds like also they've done a preliminary budget on the script, and it's a little too expensive for the money that they have. So we're going to have to go back through the script and really try and consolidate scenes, maybe cut scenes, but really just boil this thing down a little bit so that it can be done on the budget they have. I honestly don't know what the budget is at this point, but I mean, I'm guessing it's well less than $1 million, probably even less than $500,000. I really don't know though, but you know, whenever you're making a movie, you always want more money. There's always, you know, more bigger set pieces, you know, more actors. You always push to get as much value as you can for the money. So there's probably some sort of extraneous scenes. Maybe there's some scenes that are fairly expensive but don't really serve the plot that much. Maybe it's a spoof comedy, so obviously jokes are a big part of it. Maybe there's some jokes they don't think are funny but would save them some money, so we can cut some of those things out. So I will have hopefully a spitballing session with them. We've been talking mostly on Skype. I've gone into the office a few times, but it's over an hour away from where I live. So typically what we've just been doing is Skype. So probably get to that this week. The other big thing I'm working on is the TV pilot. It takes place in Southern California music scene in the early 1960s. I've been talking about this the last few weeks. I'm writing about 10 pages per week, which is what I did last week. So the first week I got to page 6. Last week I ended up around page 16. I'll probably just need another week, and I'm thinking maybe 2. I mean, it's just a TV pilot, 30-minute TV pilot. So it'll be 25 to 30 pages. So I should finish a draft. As I said, I'm on page 16. So I should finish a draft this week. And then I'm thinking maybe next week I will just spend a week just polishing it up. And usually I can get through that pretty quickly. So maybe midweek next week, I'll be hopefully next week at this time, I'll have a rough draft, and then I'll spend a few days polishing it up. And then I'm going to send it off to my partner on this. He's a producer and also a writer. So I'll be sending it to him for notes, and then we'll start on a rewrite. But hopefully he likes it pretty much as is, so we can start to get this script out and get some meetings set up. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. Again, just keep an eye out on Wednesday or Thursday for the Kickstarter update. But that's pretty much all the projects I have going right now. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Sean Baker and Chris Bergoch. Here is the interview. Welcome, Sean, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Thank you for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can just give us a little bit of a background, kind of how you got into the entertainment industry. And it's always interesting, at least for me, to hear kind of, were you one of those, film kids shooting, Super 8 films as a kid or shooting on VHS as a kid? And just where did your love of film come about, and kind of how did you eventually make it a professional career?
Yeah, I was definitely one of those stereotypes, those cliches. I fell in love with film very early on. Probably around first grade. So from that point on, the combination of Star Wars and then just, I was into the Universal monster films at the time, and my love of those sort of genre films. Over the years, I made the Super 8 movies. I did the VHS movies. I applied to NYU for film school. I got in, that sort of thing. It was like the regular route that you hear a lot of. But it was actually right after school that I was lucky enough to actually land a job at a small publishing firm. They needed somebody for their AV department, and I fit that role, and I shot a few commercials for them, which allowed me to then get some commercials outside of that publishing house, and through some freelance work, and that paid for my first film, my first independent film called 4-Letter Words, which I made, very early on in my early 20s, and it was shot on 35 millimeter. It was probably, it was made for very little, but it definitely had high production value. Being that I was in my 20s, and, we all waste our time in our 20s and we don't realize how time is flying. It took until the year 2000 for it actually to get recognized. And it was Matt Dentler, who used to run, who is now, the big guy over at iTunes Movies. But at the time he was running South by Southwest and programming it. So he actually programmed 4-Letter. He was the first champion of my films back in the year 2000. And it's, and that was that. But during the other part of my 20s, the later part of my 20s, I was, doing a lot of AV work. I was like freelance video shooting, doing sound, etc. And this weird thing happened. I actually had this other career sort of fall into my lap accidentally. I became one of the creators of a show called Greg the Bunny, which is a cult comedy show with puppets that had a very long run, several incarnations. We went from IFC to Fox to IFC to MTV. And I was one of the creators of it because basically my two partners and I, Spencer Shenoy and Dan Milano, we were fooling around one night in his place with his, with a VHS camera, and Dan doing some puppet work, and we were laughing and thinking, oh, this is a great character for a television show. And next thing you know, we put it up on public access, which was like, the way you got seen back in the day before YouTube. And that opened the doors for us. We got on a show on IFC, and so that show was like my way of keeping me afloat over the years. It was like my way that there was basically a steady income, not making us rich, but paying rent and allowing me to make these small independent films, which was my true love, and then after Four Letter Words, I made a film called Takeout, which I co-directed with Chi-Ching Zhou. That got distribution through Kino Lorber, and that led to Prince of Broadway, which led to Starlet, which led to Tangerine. So it's been, if you've ever seen that film called Living in Oblivion, that's sort of my life. But I've had this other career of Greg the Bunny, which has been, which has been quite nice because it's been keeping me still in this industry working while, battling to make these independents.
Yeah. So let me back up on a couple things you just said. I'm curious, you got this job at the publishing house. You said you did a couple commercials and stuff. Did you get these technical skills to do the shooting? Was that stuff that you learned at NYU, or was it stuff that you just picked up in high school doing your own things? Where did you get those sort of skills to even get that job and to be tasked with making commercials with them?
It was high school and both high school and NYU. And it was mostly to do with editing, quite honestly. And I still edit to this day. That was my skill. That was my strong point, was editing and post-production. So, with the commercials, I would obviously hire a DP. I would hire a crew. But I was always, I was editing. So that's what really, I think, even got me that job, because I was somebody who was putting together their promo videos for their books.
I see. And you said this first movie, Four Letter Words, it didn't get recognized till 2000, and that you were sort of inferring that you maybe shot it in like 1995 or something, and it took many, many years. How many years did it take from the time you started shooting to the time it actually got to South by Southwest?
You got it. It was it was actually 96. It was 96, okay. And it took 4 years, which at the time felt like an eternity. Now 4 years flies by like that. But I didn't, the film was written in a nonlinear structure, it was a nonlinear storytelling technique. It was like very influenced by like Rashomon and Mystery Train. It took me years to figure out that wasn't appropriate for this story. And then as soon as I put the film in a linear style, re-edited the film and got it into a linear storytelling style, it worked. And that's when it went to South by.
I see. And were you literally shooting it for 4 years, or you shot it and then editing it for 4 years?
Shot it, edited it. Well, it took about a year to edit. And then it just sat around while it wasn't getting into film festivals. And there wasn't much, heat on it at all. And plus I started getting busy with Greg the Bunny. So a lot of factors led to the fact that it just was not getting out there until a blind submission to South by, never thinking it would get in. And I heard back and it got in. So, yeah.
So let's talk about Greg the Bunny, the show. Was it really as simplistic as shooting this thing on a Saturday night, throwing it up on public access, and then IFC channel is calling you to turn it into a show? Was there some marketing, some phone calls or something that kind of got the thing going a little bit? Well,
there's always that little bit of a connection. There's always that little connection that happens with almost any project. Every time you get into a festival, or anytime, you get a producer or an investor interested, it's because somebody has passed the word along. And that's what happened with Greg the Bunny. We did get a blind call from William Morris. That definitely did happen, from them just seeing it. But the way it got to IFC was our executive producer, Gil Holland, who at the time, and still is, is an independent film sort of poster boy, guru. He had several indies out at the time. One that had won Sundance, I believe. And he was the one who just passed our tape along to the IFC channel. And so saying, this is hot right now on public access, if you can say that. And they were the ones who then, after that tape was delivered to them, they jumped on board. We were actually one of the first two I guess, original programs on IFC.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's see. I think Chris might be here, so let's see if we can add him to the
Okay.
conversation. So welcome, Chris. You're the co-writer of Tangerine. Thank you for coming on the podcast with me and talking with me today. I just did a quick overview of Sean's background in the entertainment business. Maybe we can do the same thing with you. We can just talk about quickly how you got into the business and kind of got to the point where you're working professionally.
Yeah, just the short answer is that before I went to NYU Film School, that's where I met Mr. Baker right there.
Okay.
And we started collaborating on each other's projects there. Before that, I just was one of the same cliche kids that you always hear about. 9 years old, Super 8 camera, making movies with the friends, and having my mom film them, and always knowing that there was probably nothing else I was talented enough to do. So it had to be movies or nothing. And luckily, I got into NYU, and from there, we did a show together called Greg the Bunny, which started on New York Public Access. I don't know if Sean mentioned that. And
He did. Yep.
I was always involved with that. And then it had this weird life where it had 5 incarnations. It went from Public Access to IFC, then it jumped to Fox, then it jumped back to IFC, and then to MTV. And then that MTV show was actually a happy accident when we didn't get a second season, because that's what led to Starlet. Yeah. And then Starlet to Tangerine.
Okay, perfect. So let's dig into your most recent film, Tangerine, which you guys co-wrote and Sean, you directed. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick log line or just a basic overview of the story. I always link to the trailer, so people can definitely check that out through the show notes. But maybe to start, just a quick log line.
Chris, would you like to?
It's about Tangerine is about a working girl who tears through the streets of Tinseltown on Christmas Eve, searching for the pimp that broke her heart. And we meet lots of interesting characters along the way, and ultimately it's a film about friendship.
Okay, good. So let's dig in a little bit into this. One of the big things that I had heard about the film before getting in contact with you guys was that it was shot on an iPhone. As I said, this is all about selling your screenplay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But I do think after watching the movie, it's worth just talking about that for a second, so people have a little bit better of an idea of what this actually is. And Sean, I saw you in a Film Courage interview where you just briefly described really 2 main things: the Steadicam that you used and the audio that you used. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that, and again, just for a minute or two, so people kind of understand technically what you were actually doing out there with this iPhone.
Okay, well, really quick then, we shot on the iPhone 5S. This is before the iPhone 6 came out. It was really as simple as this: an iPhone 5S with an app called Filmic Pro, and that allows you to shoot at 24 frames a second and has all of these other bells and whistles that allows you to manually control the device. And then we had an anamorphic adapter that fits over the iPhone lens and allows you to shoot in true scope. And that plus a little stabilizer, a handheld stabilizer, those 3 things together is what we used. It really wasn't any – people sometimes say they had a pimped out iPhone. Well, not really. Simply just that.
Mm-hmm. And the audio was recorded by a sound engineer.
Yes. It was a complete sound was recorded the way you would record sound on any other production.
Okay, perfect. And I watched this thing on my television, and it looked good on the 42-inch flat screen. So it's actually amazing what you can do with it as far as resolution with the iPhone.
When he did the
resolution is the same. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, when he did it was a 5S, and it's the latest iPhone available when we were getting ready in 2013. And when Sean, I'll never forget when he first did those tests, and he showed me these tests, and I was blown away. I was like, people aren't even going to believe that this is shot on an iPhone with the adapter on it, giving it all the nice anamorphic cinematic flares and all that. It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into the story of Tangerine. Where did this idea come from? Like, what's sort of the germ of this story?
We were doing when Starlet was being written. Originally, it was a much simpler story. Starlet was originally just going to be about more of a cinema verite. A girl who happened to be an adult film star, not focusing on her career. It's their day off, and she's just wandering the streets of LA searching for her lost dog for 90 minutes. And the story evolved on Starlet, but the germ of the idea, you always file them in the back filing cabinets of your hard drive in your brain, and we wanted to do a story about just maybe back streets of LA, locales that you don't normally see when films are taking place here. And so we kind of entered Tangerine just knowing it would be something about a search through the streets of LA. And we were fascinated with this corner where Donut Time is, which is sort of an infamous, unofficial red light district here in LA. Not so much anymore, but years ago there was lots of activity out there, and Donut Time's such an interesting place visually, and the people who are hanging out there, we just wanted to sort of hit the streets and investigate and find a story.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you guys literally did? You just went down to the streets and started to make friends with the people that live and work on these streets?
Yeah. Basically, that's the way you have to do it. You know, the way that I see it, and this is like really the fourth film that we're doing in this way, if you're not from the world that you're focusing on in your storytelling, I feel it's like really the only responsible and really just the only way of really going about doing this in a responsible way is to immerse yourself, and that's what Chris and I had to do. We actually started months earlier, almost 7 to 8 months earlier, I believe, where we didn't even have a plot, we didn't even have a script. We just had those simple ideas that Chris just talked about. You know, having it take place a lot at. We knew that we wanted to show this location, and we needed a big climactic scene at Donut Time, but that was essentially it. We wanted to connect with the people in that neighborhood, speak with them, really understand what a day in the life is like there before writing the script. So we had to find those people that would help us, that would be our passports, and it was also blurring the line between, you know, this research and this preliminary development. You know, we were looking for people that we could cast at the same time. So that's what happened. Maya Taylor and Kiki Katana Rodriguez, you know, they not only opened the door for us, but they eventually became the leads of the film.
Yeah, it was I'll never forget, there was a day where it was Maya who introduced us to Kiki, and we met the two of them for the first time together at a Jack in the Box on Highland, and seeing them together for the first time, there's such a contrast there that Sean and I gave each other this look that, you know, maybe we have something here, maybe we found our stars more than collaborators.
And maybe just for a minute, we can really get into sort of the nitty gritty. I mean, what did this research entail? You literally just went down to the donut shop, ordered a couple of donuts, and just wait as people walk in and out. You just strike up conversations with them? Yeah,
pretty much for the most part, and just talking about them. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that they're telling us doesn't wind up in the film, but it's just getting to know our collaborators, and, you know, in a way it helps us get to know what characters we want to write. And then, of course, there's also, you always bring a little baggage into a film. For instance, I always wanted to do there's a motel makeshift brothel scene in the film. And you know, you start thinking like, oh, okay, I've had that scene in my head a long time. This lends itself to this story. And Sean, I know you always wanted to do the car wash scene.
Right.
And it was great. When Sean found out a way to work a car wash into a film and have it serve the plot, I remember how excited he got. He's always looking for a reason to do that.
Right.
And, you know, there was a day where Maya had told us that, you know, a lot of the Johns just go into the car wash because it's cheaper than a motel room.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the stories. I mean, you describe it as a day in the life of these people, but one thing you guys did was you definitely gave the two main characters a clear story thread. You know, the one girl has her show and the other girl is trying to find her pimp. When did that enter into the picture? Like, when did you start to form those as actual stories with beats? You know, it's a clear linear progression with those beats.
Well, I'll just start by saying that after we would meet the girls, I always would jot down things on my iPad, and we'd hear about maybe Kiki wanting to, or someone that she knew wanting to have a fight, and it was like, you know, that kind of rings in your head like, okay, it's very visual. It's somebody wanting to go give somebody a beat down is exciting. And then you go home to Sean's place at the end of the night on the iPad, and you try to make sense of all these notes. And Sean, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I think I suggested, you know, maybe that's just the plot. And we were wondering if that was enough of a plot.
Yeah, I remember that was the first thing that we heard that struck us as something that could be the A plot. You know, this mission to find a woman who was a cisgender woman who was involved in an affair. I remember at that point we were very intrigued by that idea, and we knew we could flesh it out, fictionalize it, obviously, because it never even really happened in real life. It was just a thought that we had heard from somebody. So we knew that we could flesh this out, but I was unsure whether it was enough to carry a whole movie. So I remember calling Chris and saying, all right, so we have this one great idea, but what else are we going to do for the rest of the movie? And he was like, no, Sean, that's it.
That gives us the opportunity to give our A to B plot and search through the streets and meet these interesting characters, sort of have an urban Wizard of Oz, if you will, where you encounter all these crazy personalities on the back streets along the way. And then there's the Christmas Eve aspect where, we've always both wanted to do, Christmas movie. But how do you do a Christmas movie that, you haven't seen before? And it just seemed like both of us are from New York, and we were in LA for, at the time, it would be about 4 years. And so that was enough time to sort of have experienced a couple of Christmases here. And it never really feels like Christmas. And the question comes like, well, just because it doesn't look like Christmas doesn't mean it isn't Christmas. And that sort of became a running theme in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk a minute about just your writing process. You've described it a little bit, taking these notes. I get a lot of people, who listen to this podcast who are collaborating with someone. What is your collaboration like? Are you guys in the same room? Do you outline? You come up with a detailed outline? Just maybe describe exactly what that process looks like for the two of you guys.
Chris?
Oh, well, there's no set way. It actually depends very much on the project. I'll give you an example. We were actually hired to write an action film, proper screenplay, that we needed to actually break the story first. And so Sean and I will be in the room. We prefer to be in the room and do old school index cards on the wall so we could actually see it. Sean will fill a whole wall of his apartment up with the index cards so we could switch them around, and it's very tangible. And once we break the story, then we can go our separate ways and we can divvy up the scenes. And like Sean might want to have a special reason to write this or that scene. Another one calls to me more. We actually prefer to separate, write them on our own, and then kind of mix them back together and come back together once that's done. And then he can give me his scenes, I can give him my scenes, and we can critique them and mold them that way. Mm-hmm. So it's together, separate, back together.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you guys, when you have a disagreement, how do you guys resolve that disagreement?
I mean, I think it rarely happens, but I'll give you an example on that action movie. I went crazy with the ending, and I went like total sort of just 80s commando, over the top action. And then, that's an example where Sean was like, that's a little bit too much. Let's reel this back in. He was looking at it a whole different way. And then ultimately you realize, yeah, he's totally right. That would have been ridiculous. So it's almost not really an argument. It's more of just debate and dissecting what each other have done.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of what you did. So you wrote the screenplay for Tangerine, and then what were your next steps? Did you already have financing in place? Did you go out and try and get financing?
We actually got greenlit on less than a pitch. I mean, it was basically Mark Duplass and I were on the phone, and I said that I think I want to make a micro budget. In the past he had told me that the door was always open for him to help finance a micro budget film. And at the time I couldn't find financing for this other film that I was trying to get off the ground, and which was a much higher budget. And I was panicking, and I knew that Mark might be my only saving grace. And so I called him, my savior there. And so I called him up and I said, I think I'm ready to make this micro budget because nothing else is going on. And he said, well, what's your idea? And I said, Santa Monica and Highland. And literally, that's it. I just had to say the intersection. He happened to know about the intersection because he's also an LA native, and he, or at least he's living here now. And so he basically greenlit it. Then of course I said, well, now we have to start our immersion and really start our research. And I think then Chris and I at that point started, and a few weeks to a month or something later, we actually had our first treatment ready for him.
Okay. And I want to back up a little bit. How did you build that relationship with Mark?
Oh, that's interesting. He was actually on the jury back in 2008 at Woodstock, and the Woodstock Film Festival, in which he saw my film Prince of Broadway, which was 2 films back. And he he liked it enough to help get it he was on the jury, so he helped get it the grand prize. And then we just stayed in contact. And eventually we felt, I actually started under his, we have the same agent. So, not only are we, close that way, but we're just, we remained independent film friends, seeing each other at festivals, and just knowing that someday we would work together.
Okay. So let's talk a minute about casting and working with actors who are maybe not don't have a long history of professional acting. One of the telltale signs to an amateur film is bad acting, and the acting was really good in this film. And so I may wonder if maybe you can give us some tips for casting people who don't have a long acting resume and getting good performances out of them, because I think for a film like this, it's absolutely crucial.
Well, I would say that you have to find good actors. That's the thing. I mean, I was lucky enough that Maya and Kiki were already aspiring entertainers. They had actually studied drama in junior high or high school, both of them. So it was something they've always wanted to do. Now, I had no idea they were as good as they are until I got them in the rooms doing what we do. We do these workshops, workshopping sessions. Very early on in the process. Once we had our treatment together and we started trying to flesh out scenes, I would put them in a room together and just have them riff on the stuff that we had already written. A few lines of dialogue here, a few themes here. Doing these improv sessions and seeing if they can actually perform. And I remember that first workshop session that we had. They both blew me away. And I wasn't expecting it. And I think at that point it was where Chris and I think Chris and I then became confident enough to allow their characters to truly dominate the film. We didn't know up to that point whether these two characters, it would become their story entirely. And, but it did after those, after they really proved themselves.
Yeah,
So,
sometimes you could see people, like when I mentioned seeing them in the fast food place together, and then you turn a camera on in front of people and they kind of could freeze up sometimes, and that didn't happen here. It was amazing, actually. They would just be the same as they were in that fast food place, and it was electric.
Mm-hmm. And were there some other people that you met in a similar fashion? Maybe you gave them a screen test and they were not able to perform. Like, was there a bunch of other people then these were the two best of actors, so you kind of wrote the story around them?
No, we actually, again, I think it was about us just knowing that we wanted these two characters to be on this journey. That was already established. Mm-hmm. And so it was just about figuring out to what percentage their stories were going to, be in the film, in the final product. But I would say they did have people around them, friends and people that we also met on the street that we were attempting to have, we were hoping that they would be much larger characters in the film, but they did not have the skills that Maya and Kiki had. So it wasn't just like we could just walk up to anybody and get those performances. We actually found two very talented people from that area.
Okay.
And it's also an interesting thing I want to mention that happens when you do mix first-time performers like Maya and Kiki with seasoned vets like a James Ransone or Karan Karagulian, who plays Razmik and has been in all of Sean's films. And I think that they rub off each other in a really cool way, don't you think, Sean? Where they kind of almost influence each other.
Yeah, most definitely. Sometimes actors who have a heavy method or have a very specific methid they'll rub off on the first timers, because the first timers will pick up on their way of working. Like, for example, if you have an actor who is really, who uses the Meisner technique, in which there is a lot of repetition and definitely definite exercises that you can sometimes see playing themselves out while they're acting. First timers will just pick up on that and then just repeating things as well. So it's very interesting to mix. I love to mix first timers and sometimes even non-professionals with seasoned actors.
And I've also seen it go the other way, where some of our actors are so used to, this is the script, you're going to say, like Aaron Sorkin, every ellipsis must be hit. But then they see how freeing Sean is with the actors and how he gives them the freedom to make it their own, and it excites them, because that might be something they've never been exposed to, and it's fun to see that happen.
Okay. I want to back up just a little bit on the story point. Obviously, the whole issue of transgenderism is kind of a very topical issue. And I wonder how much of that played into your decision to get involved with this story, just from a marketing standpoint. Was it just something you guys were interested in exploring, or did the fact that it's somewhat timely, actually push you? And I mean, that might be a conversation with someone like Mark, who is an investor and thinking, well, how am I going to get my money back? Doing something timely can certainly help with that.
No, actually, to tell you the truth, this was not long before, but it was before all of this hit the zeitgeist. We shot it in December of 2013 and January 2014, and all of our prep was all over, 2013. So this is pre Laverne Cox on the cover of Newsweek. This was pre-Obama using the term transgender in a speech, and pre-Caitlyn Jenner's transition. So those three things are what I consider the three most important cultural events that have gotten us to this point. And it just happened to hit all after we had already shot. So we had already shot, we were in post-production while all this was happening. So when we hit Sundance, it was already a hot topic. So this was something that was definitely, it came from more of a place in which we just really wanted to, I think that, it came more from our desire to continue the look and the focus on sex work, because we had done it with our previous film and we wanted to do it again with this film. And it happened to be that this location was sort of a red light district that was frequented by transgender sex workers. That's what got us there.
Okay. And then you mentioned Sundance. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit. What was the submission process like? I mean, you always hear for filmmakers, it's like, you got to know someone, you got to have a good producer's rep. Maybe you can talk about your experience getting into Sundance.
Sure. Well, this is the first, I've made 5 features, and this is the first time I've been at Sundance. It took a while. It takes a while to get on their radar. They knew about me after Prince of Broadway, and I think that Starlet just didn't make the cut because I gave them a very early cut. I gave them a cut that was way over 2 hours and wasn't ready. And that's the one thing. I don't give much advice to filmmakers because I feel like I'm still in a place where I'm learning and I don't like to give advice. But there is one thing I have to say. Never let anybody see anything that isn't a fine cut or very close to like that mastered version that you want people to see, because people don't have the imagination that you have. They have no idea what you'll eventually turn in. So I think, I turned in a cut to Sundance with Starlet that was just way over, it was way too long and it wasn't tight in any way. But I think that again kept us on their radar. And then by the time Tangerine was ready, they were looking out for it. Plus, of course, the fact that Duplass both Mark and Jay Duplass were executive producers, that helped a lot.
Yeah. So, well, what's next for you guys? What are you guys cooking up next?
There's a whole bunch of stuff. We definitely have a whole bunch of concepts ready to go, and there's one in particular that we're really excited about that takes place in Florida that actually we are in the process of what we talked about when we hit the streets at donut time and we were meeting people, and that's when we met Maya and Kiki. That's where we're at right now with this next one, and it's really a fun thing to do because, you make all sorts of interesting new friends in the process.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So how can people see Tangerine?
Well, right now it's everywhere. I guess the easiest would be for Netflix streaming. It's in everybody's house that has Netflix. The Blu-ray and DVD we packed with some really great interviews. We have interviews with not just the stars and the leads, but every tiny bit player in the film gets a little bit of a chance to speak about their character, because one of the things we try to do is even down to the guy that you see in the shower when we meet Dinah, and she's in the middle of work, and she's pulled out by Cindy. That John, he happens to be John Gulager, who's a director who directed the Feast trilogy and Piranha 3 Double D. He won Project Greenlight that second season. We try to give them backstories. and we try to, just like imagine what their day is when we come to see them in the story of Tangerine. And so you get a chance to hear a little bit about that on Blu-ray.
I see. Cool. So, what's the best way for people to kind of keep up with what you guys are doing? If you are on Twitter, you can mention your Twitter handle. If you have a blog, a Facebook page, anything you feel comfortable sharing, and I'll round it all up and I'll put it in the show notes. But fire away with anything so people can follow you.
That's Little Film over there at LILFILF on Twitter. I'm just my name, Chris, Bergoch. You say it Bergoch, but anybody's welcome to say it any way they'd like Oshkosh Bergoch. And Tangerine Film on Twitter, at Tangerine Film, and also Facebook/Tangerine Film is our. Sean and I run the Twitter page, so if anybody sees the film and you want to talk about it, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and there's a few different Facebook pages. I have my public Facebook page, and so does all the films that we've been talking about. So, yeah.
Okay. And if you fish through Tangerine Film, you can find all of the. We just did a little Christmas card, and on that you can find Mark Duplass, Jay Duplass, Marcus and Kerry Cox, film's other producers, Darren Dean, Su Ching. So, and by the way, Su Ching, not only a producer on the film, but she's Mama-san, and she's not only a Mama-san, but she's continuity and she's costumes. On a small film like this, we're all wearing a lot of hats, and I don't know how she did it. She was actually serving donuts to real people, by the way. When you watch the end of the film, it's kind of crazy. And then we have to chase them in the street and get them to sign the releases. And
yeah. Well, perfect, Chris and Sean. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. I really enjoyed the film. I wish you luck, continued success with it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Happy New Year.
You too. Happy New Year to you too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analysis on feature film scripts and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase the logline and synopsis service as a standalone product. As a bonus, too, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. So to wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Sean and Chris. First thing is the movie is currently on Netflix as this podcast is being published, so I would definitely check it out. Hopefully, as a screenwriter, you have a subscription to Netflix on demand and can catch it. It's there for everyone to see. It's definitely a movie that's not for everyone. It's very much an art film, but I definitely think it's worth checking out, especially, as I said, because it's so accessible through Netflix. Check it out, and you can really get a good sense of kind of what they were able to do with an iPhone and a very, very, very micro budget. It's also, I find this very inspiring because literally every one of us, pretty much everyone listening to this podcast, my guess is they have a iPhone or something equivalent or access, at the very least, access to such a camera. So any one of us, could go out and do this. There's really no excuses for any of us for not going out and making a movie. If you're sending your scripts out and you think they're great and nobody is listening, nobody wants to read them, just go make your movie. Get an iPhone, get it some sort of software editing, so some sort of software that can edit video on your computer, and just go make it. It's not going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be a simple process, but it's pretty straightforward. And, with a little creativity and ingenuity, you can do it. Also, I want to point out another interesting thing that Sean mentioned was his relationship with Jay Duplass, which originated at the Woodstock Film Festival. I think a lot of people, when they start out on the independent film route, they think they're going to submit, there's South by Southwest. There's a couple of big festivals, Tribeca, Con, obviously, Sundance. And there's a couple of these big festivals that, all filmmakers submit to, and then they don't get in there, and they feel like that maybe is the end, or they're not going to get the publicity that they want. And I think I've never heard of the Woodstock Film Festival. I think that's the one Sean mentioned. In that one of his earlier films went to, and he met Jay Duplass, and Jay Duplass then ended up helping to fund this current film. So he found, another filmmaker that had some, money to invest in his film, believed in him as a filmmaker. And also that relationship with Jay Duplass helped him get into Sundance this year. I think it's interesting to hear Sean say he tried to get into Sundance with some of his other films. They didn't get in. And I just think this really points out an important point that, a filmmaking career is not about one film. It's about a body of work. And so you've got to get yourself in a position where you can create a body of work. Your first film is probably not going to get into Sundance. Most likely your second and third and fourth film are not going to get into Sundance either. But if you can keep producing these films, you can figure out some sort of a strategy and a scenario to continue to produce films. I think that's a great long-term strategy that can pay off. And it's going to take a lot of work. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my own movie On the Pinch. Is I'm running a Kickstarter campaign. I'm kind of testing the waters to see how easy it is to raise money on Kickstarter. I'm investing some of my own money, but I'm not investing so much of my own money that I'm going to go bankrupt. And I think that's one other important point. I do run into a lot of filmmakers that have, mortgaged their house or, tapped out their credit cards. And I think that's a terrible strategy. Again, because long term, you've got to figure out a strategy where you can rinse and repeat. You can continue to do what you're doing, and move forward. And if you get a second mortgage on your house or you max out your credit cards, that's not a strategy that can really ever be used again. It's a kind of a Hail Mary. If the movie is a big success, which is highly unlikely, then you will make out okay. But if it's not, then you're strapped with all this debt. So while I'm a big proponent of going out there and trying to make things happen for yourself, I do think you should be cautious enough as to not get in over your head. And again, listen to what he just did. He had an iPhone. He had some sort of a lens that he could attach, some sort of a device, sort of a Steadicam device. These are not expensive things. I mean, plus the software, you can get video editing software for a few $100s. I mean, we're talking like well less than $1,000. You can probably go out and make a feature film. Again, go check out Tangerine on Netflix. You can tell it's pretty low budget. The production value is not always great. So you want to, you want to think of a story that can be told. And if it looks a little rough around the edges, it will still work. It's not a super glossy, Hollywood superhero movie. That's not what he's making. And that's not what this looks like. So you got to keep that in mind, right for your budget, right for your production value. But it's a great it's a great film to just check out if you're thinking of this model. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much all the notes. I wrote down a quick note. I did really want to mention that be prudent when thinking about your films, and don't get in over your head with a lot of credit card debt. I also think this kind of touches on, I know a lot of people that listen to this are just screenwriters. They're not necessarily filmmakers or producers. But again, I think this strategy of sort of what I'm talking about, the idea that you can rinse and repeat and constantly, turn that wheel and get more stuff out there. I think that plays into a lot of my strategy of writing low budget genre films. These are films that are fairly easy. And again, nothing in this business is easy, but comparatively to a studio film, these low budget genre films are fairly easy to get produced. And if you get to the point where you're good at writing them, you understand budgets and you can write these things, you can start to build, again, a body of work. And I just really believe that that's going to give you more chance of success, because each one of these films that gets made has a chance of becoming a hit, of blowing up. And there's plenty of examples of really super low budget films becoming even just sort of minor hits, and those can kind of propel you along the way. And the way you're going to have that happen most likely is, again, by turning this crank and getting multiple projects produced, and have some sort of a strategy and positioning yourself so you can constantly write a script and actually get it to producers and actually get it produced. With these big studio movies, you're lucky if you get one shot. And if that studio movie maybe the script gets purchased, but the movie never gets made. Maybe the script gets purchased, maybe the movie gets made, but then it bombs. You're kind of up the creek. And those are so difficult to make happen. It's hard to figure out a strategy where you can just rinse and repeat. Well, I'll just do another one. Yeah, in theory, you might be able to, but it's very, very difficult. Again, these low budget genre films is a great way to get many, many credits and improve as a writer. Maybe that first low budget genre film that you sell, for a few $1,000s, maybe some college kids go and make it on a $50,000 budget. Maybe that movie isn't that great, but that kind of gets you in the swing of things. You are going to learn a tremendous amount by having some of those low budget films made, seeing sort of the production considerations, understanding what goes wrong in a production and why movies sometimes end up horrendously bad. So again, think about this. I think what Sean and Chris did with Tangerine, I do think there's some real ways you can apply it. If all you want to do is be a screenwriter, I think there are some ways to sort of apply this strategy of one that is making things happen for yourself and figuring out a long-term strategy. It's not about one project. It's about a body of work. I think, as I said, what Sean and Chris are doing is clearly it's about a body of work. They've already done several films, and this film Tangerine has done pretty well, so I have no doubt that now they're going to make a bunch more. And again, my guess is if Sean can't raise millions of dollars to do his next film, he'll just knuckle down and he'll go out and he'll make another micro-budget film, because that's what he does. He's a filmmaker, he's an artist, and he's going to just keep plugging away and doing what he loves to do. So I think that's terribly inspiring. Anyways, that's the show. Thank you for listening.